At my husband's seventh-day memorial, my daughter-in-law leaned in and hissed, "At least the old man's out while the bells were still ringing." I didn't turn or raise my voice. Years of boardrooms and bedside vigils taught me to breathe, fold my hands, and let the heat pass without burning. Instead, I opened my prayer card, touched my rosary, and with one quiet line I'd written days before, triggered a legal hold that kept every dollar from moving without me. That was only the first move. What followed would test blood marriage and the company we built one measured step at a time. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I had never noticed how the nave swallowed footsteps until that morning. St. Michael's in Montrose held a shine from the drizzle, the stained glass breathing watercolor over lilies along the rail. I knelt my left knee, answering with a dull ache that remembered birthday's garden work and the man I'd loved for 43 years. The memorial program lay open on the pew. In small type below boldface for donors, my name appeared, Rowena Hale Spouse. I traced the letters with a fingertip as if heavier ink might change what people chose to see. The kneeler creaked when I lowered it. I let the rosary rest in my palm and counted beads the way nurses count breaths, steady and unhurried. Father Lionel Keene cleared his throat at the ambo, and the air stirred with a perfume that felt medicinal. I tucked a pencil into the program's spine, a metronome for time and grief I meant to keep private. The usher, a boy I'd seen grow from choir robes to a graduation suit, hovered with a clipboard. "Mrs. Hale, we're asking immediate family to sit one pew back for the flow," he murmured. I smiled and kept my place at the aisle end. "I'll be still," I said. He flushed and retreated. A partner from Lucan's firm slid into a row behind me, then pretended an urgent text when our eyes met. Slights light as ash drifted and settled. A volunteer angled the lilies to trim my view of the pulpit. Someone whispered about catering in the narthex. Once people stood taller when I walked in. Today they checked watches. I noted the change as a surveyor notes grade. The organ swelled. Rain ticked at the window. Across the aisle, Mayalis tucked hair behind one pearl and looked past me as if I were woodwork. Father Keene began the homily voice weathered and kind. He spoke of mercy of work done without fanfare of a husband who kept a toolbox in his truck and a prayer in his pocket. The words should have carried me. Instead, they backed up against a sound at my right, a hiss close enough to brush my ear. "At least the old man's out," Mayalis said to her sister. I did not turn. My hands folded as if clasping a bird. Breath in, breath out. Lucan's shoulder shifted 3 seats down a dog-hearing thunder, the kneeler lilies and glass arranged around that sentence. I put the pencil to the margin and wrote 11:38, ink steady, face composed, no drama. I let the line settle the way a beam settles into studs. Cruelty likes an echo. I denied it one. So, I bowed my head as if to pray and opened the small card tucked into the program. On one side, the Sacred Heart, on the other, the handwriting I practiced last night. Reuben filed the hold 11:45 a.m. I folded the card so the note hid between saints and dates. I touched the rosary to the crease and let air fill my lungs. We had built a company and a family. Both deserved clean rails while grief did its work. I did not look at Mayalis. I did not offer correction or its cheap cousin a scene. Instead, I counted 10 beads and slid the card back a tool inside a prayer. Rain tapped against the oak door. In the parish hall, the receiving line formed with quiet choreography. Paper cups, coffee, a tray of cookies. Sweets stale. People offered stories about my husband. I thanked them and watched their eyes. The kind ones met mine. The careful ones landed on my shoulder, the lilies the floor. A cousin spoke too loudly and fled. Lucan stood by the punch bowl, tall and pale, performing the sun, his grief decent, his distance practiced. He glanced at Mayalis like weather. She was radiant in navy hair, smooth mascara intact. She pressed cheeks, accepted sympathy like a small throne. He was a force, someone told her. He built so much for all of you. We carry the legacy, she said. I poured coffee for a widow from our street and logged what I would need later, who said legacy, who leaned on we, who looked relieved. Information gathered like pins holds fabric together until you choose a seam. At the door, a parish attendant raised the leather guest book and, smiling toward Milas, offered the pen. "Would you sign as family representative?" she asked. The kindness was real. Milas reached nails immaculate. I did not hurry. I accepted the pen. I signed where it belonged, Rowena Hale, and added widow and co-founder in the relation blank. I set the pen down and nodded the way I used to thank nurses at 2 a.m. No lecture, no correction. Some ceilings come down when you loosen a single screw. Behind me, someone cleared a throat. Milas's smile tightened, then returned a shade too bright. I closed the book gently and stepped aside for the next person. The lily's scent rose again, clean and sharp, and I steadied my breath to match the bell outside. It was enough for today, enough now. Outside, the drizzle had thickened to a fine curtain wet. The bells tolled noon. I drew my coat close and felt the phone in my pocket silent until it wasn't one buzz. I didn't need to look, but I did. Reuben Witt received. Hold filed at 11:45. We'll talk Monday. I locked the screen and lifted my face to the damp light. Relief came not as triumph, but as level ground. Father Keene stepped under the awning and met my eyes. He said nothing, only a nod heavy with years. Behind him, voices gathered, laughter threading through grief. I walked to the curb. Tires sent up a small hiss, answering the one I refused to dignify. The bells were still ringing when my phone buzzed once Reuben had moved. The rest would depend on what my husband left behind. I reached Reuben Witt's office before the receptionist flipped the brass lamp to full the sky over Upper Kirby, a sheet of pewter. The building hummed with weekday quiet elevators, sighing the scent of lemon oil from paneled halls. Through the window, cranes stalled above the west loop like praying mantises. On his desk centered rested a single leather folder. Reuben stood, clasped my forearm, once no speeches, and we sat across from each other with our hands visible. I set my rosary in its pocket and breathed in as if I were back in the pew, only this time there would be signatures, not hymns. Reuben slid the folder between us and opened to a tab marked Execution Copy. His voice never rose. It didn't need to. He read the operative clauses, his finger traveling the lines like a metronome transfer of all issued shares of Hale Masonry and Civil, together with controlling interest and voting rights to me, Rowena Hale without condition or escrow. Beneficiary designations matched. Successor trustees were named in the event of my incapacity, not my absence. He paused once to let the air settle. "The bank received your hold request on Saturday," he said, tapping a note. "Payment rails are in review. No funds can move without your countersignature." I nodded once. He handed me a sealed envelope in my husband's hand. The slant of George's R looked like it always had on grocery lists and anniversary cards. I broke the seal by feel, not drama. The letter did not beg or apologize. It told the truth that ambition had started to outrun judgment in our son, that charm had become a tool in my daughter-in-law's hand, that he had waited too long to speak plainly. He wrote that small sums had slipped then larger ones, that he chose me not out of romance but because I had the steadier compass. Lead with fairness, keep receipts, don't let anger be your accountant, he wrote. I did not cry. I underlined keep receipts with Reuben's blue pen and folded the page back into itself as if tucking him into a forgotten coat. Reuben turned the leather binder so the tabs faced me bank statements, vendor ledgers, approvals, wire logs. He outlined chain of custody, timestamp every copy, initial each page you handle. Originals go into the fireproof drawer, movement logged, keys double witnessed. I added a checklist to my notebook dates on the left, people on the right, a column for questions no one wanted to answer. We did not argue about motives. We planned to prove what was provable and let the rest knock on its own door. Facts, not feelings, would set the plumb line. Now. When the phone on his credenza chirped, he put it on speaker. "Nadine, we're on with Rowena," he said. "Nadine Perot. Our HR lead sounded brisk and careful, like someone who had sorted 1,000 W-2s and knew where dust hides. "We've got a recurring 1099 payee, Apex Consults," she said. "Identical amount monthly. No time cards. No purchase order trail. Email remittance copies list a P.O. box in Conroe. The vendor file has a blank where the W-9 should be, then a copy uploaded 3 months later with mismatched handwriting." My throat did not tighten. My pen did. "Would you be willing to sign an affidavit about the absence of timesheets?" Reuben asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. We scheduled a document pull for noon tomorrow. Payroll accounts, payable and vendor onboarding. I wrote Apex no PO, no W-9 Conroe on my list and boxed it in red. Reuben leaned back, the chair leather creaking like old pews. I cleared the kitchen table the way nurses clear a tray, everything off, everything purposeful. The house in West University Place was so quiet I could hear the wall clock count each second. I laid out the copies, rubbed the date stamp like a worry stone, then thumped it on the corner of every page. APR 14 2025. Red pen uncapped. I circled a line that repeated like a drumbeat. Apex Consults. Same amount, same day of month. I wrote the totals on a yellow sticky, pressed it to the rim of my teacup, and watched the ink bleed as the steam rose. George used to tease that I organized feelings by folders. Tonight I let the folders hold the feeling so the rest of me could breathe. Nadine's email landed with a soft ding and a subject line that made my stomach tilt. Secure 10,999, packet plus vendor master. I printed initialed the footer of each sheet, logged the time 9:12 p.m., and slid the originals into a manila folder with a fresh chain of custody sticker. On speaker, Nadine sounded tired but precise. Recurring ACH to Apex. No timesheets in Workday, no purchase orders in the project files, she said. We have W-9 but no statements of work. I'll send the ACH summaries and the vendor master. You'll have everything policy allows by morning. I thanked her, recorded her name on my pad, and placed a paperclip like a hinge across the packet. I lined up the Apex dates with board minutes and draw schedules. Red circles became a path across the table, then a shape I did not want to recognize. Payments posted even in months when our minutes showed no change orders and no added scope. Someone had taught the machine to pay without a reason. On one invoice copy, a familiar set of initials lurked in the margin. LH air left my lungs in a short burst, then returned on a slow count of 4. I boxed the letters and wrote in tiny print match approvals, then aligned the invoice against the draw calendar again. I set the pen down, washed my cup, and faced the black window that gave back an older woman in a cardigan and work boots. Verify, I told her. I texted Calder to meet me at Carson at First Light and wrote the list we would need, weigh tickets bills of lading driver logs, quarry dispatch. He replied with a thumbs up and 6:15. I set 2 alarms, slipped a granola bar into my tote, and left the boots by the door like a promise to my morning self. At dawn, the second ward wore a pale, dusty sky and the smell of diesel and wet rebar. Carson hummed cranes slow against the light backup beepers chirping like small birds. Calder walked toward me with the Weybridge binder, its plastic sleeves clouded from 100 flips. "You sure you want to do this yourself?" he asked. "I do," I said, and opened my phone's camera. We stood by a stack of formwork, and I photographed each ticket barcode timestamp truck ID tear net. I said the numbers under my breath the way you count a pulse. We paused to let a mixer tail out. Mud sluiced from its chute and hissed on the gravel. A field clerk offered coffee. I waved it off and asked for the driver sign-in sheet instead. Halfway through, the edges refused to meet. A week of tickets added up to 18% fewer tons than we had paid for. 2 tickets wore the same number. I laid them side by side. "Could be a printer error," Calder said, but his forehead didn't believe his mouth. He called the quarry on speaker. Only 1 truck ran that morning, the dispatcher said, neutral as a metronome. My hand stayed steady on the binder, though my chest had gone bright and tight. Across the fence, a dog barked at nothing, the way dogs do when something is wrong they cannot name. I checked the job log. It listed 2 deliveries for that hour with the same driver initialed twice. "Document don't debate," I said mostly to myself. I slid today's photographs into a clasp envelope, pressed the metal fastener, and signed across the flap in blue ink R. Hale with the time. I added the duplicate numbers to my notebook and drew an arrow to the apex amounts. Calder watched me write. "You want me to pull delivery slips from the sub?" "Not yet," I said. "We follow paper, not rumor. Let the numbers talk before people do." He nodded and tucked the binder beneath his arm like a baby he did not intend to drop. Beyond the cranes, the east sky came up in streaks of apricot. My phone buzzed a calendar reminder I dismissed without looking. I texted Indira 90-day plan starts with Carson variances. Noon in my office. She replied with a single dot, her way of saying, "Received." I took one last photograph of the binder's spine, closed it gently, and thought of George's letter, led with integrity. It isn't loud, it is patient. The duplicate ticket numbers stared back, ugly, simple, undeniable, and I tucked the envelope into my tote like a verdict still warm. Indiri arrived at my office with a portable Kanban board tucked under one arm and a hard hat under the other. She set the board on the small conference table and drew 4 columns by hand: Safety Vendors Project, Carson Variances, Treasury Controls. 3 standing sessions a week, she said, handing me a thin marker. I wrote my initials in the corner boxes for approvals and slid the magnets labeled Apex Re-Verify and Weigh Tickets Friday into the first column. I hung George's hard hat on the back of my chair and felt the weight settle behind me like a hand. By mid-afternoon, we turned paper into motion. Tess blocked recurring calendar holds and printed field checklists that fit in a back pocket. Calder walked in, tapped a line in the Carson estimate, and said we'd start pulling source quotes instead of summaries. I toured the shop floor in borrowed steel toes, checked harness tags, and asked a foreman to show me how he logs near misses. Every note I took carried a date, a time, and my initials. Small habits make big trails. The rhythm clicked. Tess posted the cadence on my door. Calder agreed to deliver weigh ticket audits every Friday before noon. Indira circled Apex and wrote vendor validation external beneath it. No theater, only lists and the willingness to follow them. I signed into the bank portal to confirm the hold Reuben filed from my prayer card signal. Pending, pending, pending. I logged out and let one long breath fall all the way to my shoes. The office exhaled and kept working on. As the afternoon thinned, the board gathered weight. We added colored tags for bank signers, dual approvals, and a quarterly external review. Indira wrote 2 sentences at the top in block letters: "No verbal approvals, document or delay." Tess mounted the board at eye level where every visitor would have to look at it. I copied routing numbers by hand into my notebook, not for memory but for attention. When a supplier called about timing on a payment, I asked her to resubmit the invoice with delivery proofs attached. Calder returned with a thin stack of quotes and a pencil behind his ear. "If we standardize units across bids, half the fog lifts," he said. We stood shoulder to shoulder at the counter, converting yards to tons, arguing gently about waste factors until the numbers behaved. It felt less like a battle and more like sweeping a floor after a long winter. Clean work, patient work. Before I left, I called my daughter Leora. We kept it short: the board, the plan, the small wins. "I hear your shoulders are lower," she said. "They are," I answered, and we let the line rest. I packed my tote with sealed copies, my small notebook, and a stainless water bottle with a fresh tamper band. For dinner at Lucan and Mayalise's, I chose the navy blazer George liked because it made me look less tired. It still did. Their house in Memorial looked staged for a magazine, candles banked on the mantel, a bowl of green limes in a white kitchen, soft music sliding under the sound of ice. At the door, Maylis hugged me to the camera side and held for a beat. "So good to have you, Rowena," she said, lips cool against my cheek. Lucan lifted a bottle. "Pinot?" he asked already, tilting it over a glass. "I'm fine, thank you," I said, and set my sealed water on the table. My place card read, "Rowena Guest." I moved it an inch toward the head and sat. Pleasantries thinned after the salad. "We've been thinking about how to make this easier." Lucan began. "A smooth transition would honor Dad Maylis," added. Day-to-day is exhausting. I set down my fork. What vendor controls have you tightened since January their eyes met? We've been focused on relationships, she said. Cold paper is the only kind that holds in heat. Advisory roles exist, Lucan said. Sunset clauses can be gracious. I asked for dates. They gave adjectives. I asked which projects were 5% over. They praised our reputation. I complimented the meal and logged each deflection. The room smelled of lemon and a floral note that didn't belong here. When Lucan stood to refill, I twisted my water's intact seal until it popped. The sound was small as a seed cracking and just as alive. To Dad, he said, raising his glass. To good work, I said, raising mine, and let the toast pass through me like a radio signal I chose not to catch. We talked about the Astros for 2 minutes. We returned to Carson's overage for 10. 18% is a lot of dust, I said. He laughed. She didn't. In the car before I turned the key, I recorded a memo date. Time phrases, the placement of the card, the offered wine, the seal. I mailed it to myself and filed it under a subject I would remember, dinner number 1, polite stagecraft. The night smelled like cut grass. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked steady as a metronome for patience. At home, I washed my face and set out tomorrow's clothes. Just after midnight, my phone lit the room. A message from Mayless James, booked a specialist next week to help you rest. Lucan can drive. The sentence wore kindness like costume jewelry. I let the screen go dark, then opened my calendar and set an early appointment with Ruben. I would prefer not to test anyone's medicine. The text glowed in the dark like a lighthouse I didn't trust specialist next week, so I set my alarm to call Ruben before sunrise. I woke before the streetlights blinked off the kind of gray hour when worry sounds louder than traffic. Mayless's midnight text still sat open on my phone, a specialist who could help me rest with Lucan, happy to drive. I read it twice, drank my coffee black, and forwarded the message to Ruben with 4 words. We take the initiative. By 7:55 a.m., I was in his Upper Kirby office. Tess had the conference phone already humming a notary log open and 2 pens aligned like rails. No pep talk, no speeches, only work. Dr. Vale is on, Ruben, said, tapping the speaker. The physician's voice was even careful. Ruben framed the ground rules first. Any evaluation would be at my request. Baseline only results owned by me. No capacity fishing, no third-party copies, he said, and no family contact without signed permission. I added no family in the room. The doctor agreed, a standard cognitive screen mood check. Vitals, routine labs, no theatrics. Monday, 9 a.m., Greenway Plaza. Tess typed as fast as people think. I watched the little red light on the phone as if it were a stoplight that finally turned green. We preserved the call like a concrete pour. Ruben dictated while I initialed names, present time of call, terms of consent. The notary stamped clean blue ovals along the margins. Ruben recited chain of custody like catechism originals, sealed copies, date stamped, each page numbered. It's not about arguing, he said, eyes on me. It's about being able to show. I slid the memo into a tamper-evident envelope and signed across the seam. Tess photographed the seal, logged the packet, and placed it in a fire-safe drawer. The room felt lighter by a pound. Then came the smoke. Tess turned her laptop toward us. A small industry forum carried an anonymous post, hinting I'd seemed confused last week. No names, just bait. We screenshotted everything and archived the link. My throat didn't tighten. It cooled. Ruben drafted a single paragraph we would hold in reserve. Hale Construction relies on physician assessments and documented procedures, not rumor. No medical details, no public scuffle. We publish only if forced, he said. Otherwise, we let paper breathe. Monday brought clean light through a high window and the antiseptic smell of a clinic that runs on time. I met Dr. Orrin Vale with a nurse witness per Ruben's list. Orientation, attention, recall. Connect letters to numbers, draw a clock. Remember a handful of ordinary words and bring them back after small talk about Houston's pollen. I worked steadily the way I used to. Close a month-end ledger, no rush, no pride. We laughed once when I drew the clock with hands too perfect, then corrected it. He checked vitals, looked me in the eyes without pity, and said scores are normal for age. No cognitive deficit indicated. He printed an attestation on letterhead signed beside his license number and handed it to me and the nurse at the same time. Ownership acknowledged. Curtain closed. I carried the envelope the way I brought my first baby home, 2 hands, no stops. At Hale HQ, Tess photographed the unbroken seam, logged the document in the notary book, and locked it in the cabinet we designated Friday. Rumor control by paperwork, she said. By sunlight, I answered. I emailed Ruben one word secure, and he replied with a thumbs-up emoji, the first I'd ever seen from him. We made a certified copy for redundancy and stamped it with today's date. We didn't celebrate. We documented. In the parking lot, I texted my son, evaluation done. Normal. From now on, operations and repayment only. No sermon. To mail us medical matters or private. Please route future scheduling through counsel. I turned off read receipts and saved screenshots of both messages with timestamps. The bubbling dots came and went, then disappeared. A delivery truck grumbled past. 2 grackles argued over a French fry as if the world hadn't tried to put me to bed like a child. At noon, we gathered in the small conference room that still smelled faintly of floor wax. With Ruben on speaker, I adopted a company policy. Concerns about leadership capacity must be sent to legal. No speculation in email or chat. Gossip goes to HR for documentation and closure. Tess posted the notice to the intranet and printed copies for the front desk and break room. We cued a short manager training how to redirect rumor into process and end it with a paper trail. We did not publish the prepared statement. We did not feed a fire that had no wood left. The sky lifted as I drove home along Buffalo, Bayou, Live Oaks, knitting shade over the road. A rowing shell stitched 3 smooth lines across the water. I dictated a short voice memo into my phone. They pushed. Paper held. Proceed. At a red light, I checked my running list. Apex payments, Carson variances, Friday dinner, cadence seats assigned to keep tempers cool. A hawk crossed the median with indifferent grace. I breathed in like I was opening a clean Ledger Squares totals proof. At home, I laid a runner down the dining table and centered 2 cream envelopes before the first knock ever sounded, one labeled Return, the other Resign. Inside Return sat a draft repayment plan with a line for apology. Inside Resign, a voluntary step back with benefits preserved if signed by month end. I set out water bottles with sealed caps, placed a plain notebook and pen at my seat, and straightened a chair, then my back. You can't control what people say about you. You can control what you can prove and what you will permit. With the memo sealed and the rumor starved of oxygen, I invited both families to dinner. If truth had a table, we would sit around it. I turned the deadbolt to ready and let the house hold its breath. I set the table like a blueprint runner, straight chairs, squared cutlery aligned. 2 cream envelopes sat centered, Return and Resign. I set my phone on the sideboard, started the recorder, and said, Sunday, April 27th, 6:30 p.m., West University Place. Purpose clarity, not spectacle. I kept the head of the table. The house waited with me. The doorbell sounded like a gavel. Leora arrived first and sat to my left. Camden and Elaine Malis' parents followed, quiet and starched. They paused at the envelopes like exhibits. Let's hear her first, Elaine whispered. Lucan and Malis came last, a step apart. At the threshold, she hugged me for her camera. I kept my hands light. We'll keep this simple, I said after grace. One at a time, no raised voices. We talked to paper, not about each other. I slid Return to the center. First, what the books show. I passed copies, clockwise bank statements with recurring payments to Apex consults, 1099s with no timesheets, wire logs lined up with project draws, duplicate way tickets from Carson stamped with GPS time. Each packet carried my initials and Ruben's chain of custody stamp. You'll see dates approvals and a repayment schedule at Prime +1, numbers only. Camden read quickly, finger landing on a margin where Lucan's initials lived like a thumbprint. Elaine's color slipped. Is this recent last 12 months, I said. Amount stayed level even in months with no change orders. The quarry confirmed 1 truck the morning those 2 tickets claimed 2. Malis exhaled a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Rowena construction accounting is messy. Vendors preload hours. You can't expect to... I expect to see work for money, I said. And I expect my son and his wife to correct errors when they benefit from them. Lucan traced a page with his thumb. Mom, he said, voice thinning. Apex was a placeholder. We were going to reconcile. You will, I answered, placing the schedule before him. That's the path called return. Square it. Interest included. Installments documented. I'll sign a release when the last dollar clears. He swallowed. How much time? 90 days, I said. Weekly proof of payments. No excuses by email. If you need help budgeting, Tess will refer counselors. Authorize updates to me only. Mayalis lifted the other envelope like a prop. And resign, I slid it to her and opened it. Your resignation from marketing and PR effective immediately. A non-interference agreement barring contact with our vendors, clients, or staff. A mutual non-disparagement clause. And for Lucan, a consulting role under clear KPIs, schedule, punch list, closeout client walkthroughs, no access to accounts, no approvals, no card. If return isn't executed, resign is filed at 9 a.m. with counsel, the board, and the bank. Blackmail, she said. Restitution, I said. Camden's voice carried old Texas courtesy. Malis, he asked, are these documents true? She looked to Lucan, then to me, then to the envelope. They're incomplete, she said at last. Context matters. Context belongs in writing with exhibits, I said. If you dispute a ticket, attach the original from the quarry. If you dispute a wire, attach the purchase order. If these are honest mistakes, we fix them. If not, we unwind them. Lucan's fingers tore a crescent from the schedule's edge. I need time, he said, not meeting my eyes. You have until 9 a.m., I said. Return signed tonight keeps this here. Resign unfiled. If not, we proceed in the morning. No shouting, no threats, no rumors, only letters. Elaine laid her hand over Camden's. Thank you for the dignity, she said. We didn't know. Now you do, I said. You won't be asked to choose sides. You'll be asked to witness your daughter's choice. The room went quiet. Leora hadn't spoken. Her eyes stayed on mine. I gathered the unsigned pages, returned them to their envelopes, and resealed my evidence packet with tape. For the recorder, I said offers stand until 9 a.m. After that, resign is filed. Dinner adjourned at 7:39 p.m. At the door, I handed Camden and Elaine their copies. Elaine squeezed my fingers as if touching something fragile. We'll talk to her, Camden said. Tonight. I appreciate your civility, I said. Lucan lingered on the porch as Malis clicked to the car. For a breath, he looked 12 again, knee-skinned eyes searching for a rule he could still obey. Mom, he said. You'll be all right if you tell the truth, I said. The truth is a hard pillow, but it lets you sleep. He nodded once and went down the steps. I locked the door, set the envelopes on the runner, and made a final note for the recorder summary emailed to counsel. Bank and board notices drafted unsent. I washed a glass, wiped a ring from the table, and carried the sealed packet to the small safe in my study. The tamper seam shone like a zipper. I closed the safe and listened to the bolts catch. Before bed, I set a legal pad, clipped a pen to it, and laid my keys on top small rituals that remind the body to move forward. Night settled. I let grief sit where anger wanted to be. In the morning, I would not need anger. I would need a fingernail and a steady hand. At 8:59 a.m., whatever they chose, I would be in the lobby peeling back a strip of vinyl to show the name that built this house. At 8:59 a.m., the lobby still held its night hush. Miguel unhooked the brass stanchions, while Tess compared a QR placard on her tablet to a legal PDF Ruben had pushed to our cloud. The lights lifted by Zone's reception first, then the brushed steel behind the desk. A few early employees drifted in with coffee and quiet nods. I took my place by the wall where a glossy vinyl overlay read J&M Partners. The letters slightly bubbled at the edge like a secret waiting to breathe. I set my tote on a bench and slipped a fingernail under the lower corner. The vinyl gave with a soft tack. I did not rush. Line by quiet line, the overlay peeled away, releasing the original letters we paid for years ago. George and Rowena Hale cut into stainless the grooves, holding a faint memory of polish. The murmur in the lobby flattened into stillness. Tessa fixed the acrylic stand beneath the name, its QR linking to our certified ownership ledger and bylaws. Someone exhaled. Someone else straightened a cuff. I turned and offered one sentence to the room. We honor what built this house. No names, no heat, heads dipped, chairs rolled back toward desks. Work resumed like a tide coming in on schedule. The lobby felt right-sized again. The Outlook chime sounded before I reached my office. An invite flashed Emergency Board Session 10:0 a.m., issued by Malus Agenda Governance Housekeeping. I forwarded it to Ruben with 3 words, attending to cure. His reply arrived in seconds, carry dual sign clause and conflicts page. I printed the relevant pages, clipped them to a clean agenda, and walked back to the boardroom with a calm I had earned, bead by bead. At 10 sharp, I entered. Lucan sat left of Malus, jaw tight, a pen already uncapped in his hand. 2 allied directors set their phones face down. On the credenza, a carafe of water, the tamper ring on the cap intact. I placed the bylaws, the certified ownership ledger, and the attendance sheet in front of me, and clicked my pen once habit, not theater. Malus began. As acting chair, I lifted a page. Recognition of chair requires the controlling signatory present. Notice of agenda requires 72 hours. Conflicted parties do not count for quorum on matters affecting their interest. I slid the dual sign clause into the center. Any motion altering governance required my signature. I identified the conflicts for the record, my son and my daughter-in-law. The room held its breath. Given defective notice and unresolved conflicts, I said the session cannot proceed. I moved to adjourn for cause. No one offered a second. None was needed under the defect provision. Meeting adjourned. I signed the minute line with the time 10:03 a.m. Tess stepped in, witness notarized. It took less than the length of a song, and the rule did the speaking. In the corridor, the building's HVAC hummed like a far river. Lucan caught up eyes rimmed with a night without sleep. Mom, I just need some time. I kept my voice even. Return or resign remains open until close of business. He nodded without seeing. Malus walked past without a word, gaze drawn to the lobby where the stainless name now caught the light again. Sometimes, light is its own argument. Back at my desk, Tess slid a manila envelope across the wood. Programs for tomorrow's contract ceremony. I opened one. Under my photo, the caption read, Rowena Hale Relative. I felt the old sting and then the new steadiness. I typed a reply to the events coordinator. Please correct to chair. Attach the same governance PDF. Then I drafted a short production note for the AV crew at the Galleria Ballroom, load the LED graphic labeled Escrow Hold, tie it to the presenter clicker on slide 4, confirm bank dual authorization alert. I walked to the lobby once more and stood under our name. People passed with coffees and hard hats and emails to answer. I thought of the years spent adding a bolt here, a scholarship there, a quiet check when a worker's spouse got sick. I thought of my husband's letter urging integrity when ambition started to outrun sense. Vindication did not arrive as applause. It arrived as a hallway with our name in its rightful place and a bylaw that still had teeth. On my way out, I paused at reception. If anyone calls about an emergency session, I told Tess, tell them the defect has been cured and regular notice applies. She smiled the small smile of someone who likes clean process. Yes, ma'am. I walked onward. The day settled back into emails and schedules. I drafted a memo to staff. Brief, neutral, evergreen operations continue under documented policy. Governance follows the bylaws. Questions go to legal. I read it twice and removed one adjective. Precision is a kindness when people are frightened. It eases fear. Near noon, a courier arrived with a linen envelope from the venue. Inside was a seating chart and a run of show. My name appeared twice, once as relative, once on an internal staff list as client signatory. The contradiction told its own story. I picked up my pen and circled both, then wrote a single word in the margin, correct. Before I left for a site check, I walked past the lobby a final time. The stainless letters did not sparkle. They held steady. That was all I wanted, and all I asked. The program had called me a relative. The LED would call me what the papers already did chair. Sonia had the ballroom screens humming by 10. She wore a headset and a grin that said she'd seen worse mornings than a contract ceremony with 3 banks and a dozen egos. Tess stood beside her with a tablet, checking the trigger address one last time. I tested the click top on my black pen, a neat, soft snap. On cue, Sonia's test slide flashed white, then returned to the client logo. Under the riser, the AV rack purred like an appliance that never needed applause. The program sat on a skirted table by the doors. Relative, it read under my name. Someone had fixed the digital files overnight, but the printed stacks had sailed through the press before corrections. I slipped one copy into my folder without comment. Paper has a memory, and so do I. Guests began to mill. I greeted the safety officer first because safety is the only speech that matters after gravity. Lucan laughed too loudly at a banker's joke. Malis arranged the hem of her dress and an expression she saves for cameras. I kept moving. The smell of coffee and hotel carpet rose in a mix that reminded me of trade shows. George and I once worked when we were the small booth near the ice machine and no one knew our name. The MC started on the dot voice syrupy with the comfort of a script. He thanked the sponsors, nodded to the clients, and called me family representative. I let the word hang where it landed. I stepped to the lectern, set my binder down, and met the room the way a level meets a wall, not accusing, just true. I pressed the pen. The big LED cut to black, then returned with a single line in stark type. Escrow hold authorization R.E. Hale. Murmurs rose like a tide, then stopped when I spoke. We close when controls are honored. No edge, no heat. Just the policy George and I signed when the company had 2 trucks and a loan we weren't sure we could keep. My phone buzzed. The bank's message slid onto the lock screen. Dual authorization lock active funds held pending, co-signature, 104713 CDT. Tess forwarded the alert to the client controller. Sonia screen captured the LED status with the house clock visible for the record. The MC shifted his weight. The client lead looked almost relieved the way an engineer does when a safety valve proves it isn't ornamental. I let the room breathe. We'll reconvene as soon as vendor controls and reconciliation reports are complete, I added. Our team stands ready. I stepped back. The MC thanked everyone for patience and pointed toward coffee as if coffee had never been more noble. In the aisle, the safety officer touched 2 fingers to the brim of an imaginary hard hat. Good call, he mouthed. The client lead nodded once in a language older than publicity. Lucan studied his shoes as if they'd started speaking ethics. Malis's mouth opened, then closed. She has learned that silence can be a kind of weather she does not control. I walked the client to a side room and opened a calendar. Tess slid in with a printed outline of next steps, document pulls, sign-offs, a new target date. We chose Thursday at 2 for a clean review with accounting. No one raised a voice. No one spun a story. We drew a straight line on paper because ink is stronger than rumor. By the time I reached the porte cochere, Houston had turned a kinder shade of bright. My phone buzzed again, a name I had not seen in years. Garrick. In the old days, he ran procurement like a chessboard 3 moves ahead and never unkind to people who lifted things for a living. We should talk, his text read. I have something you need. He attached a preview, an email thread that mentioned Apex identical amounts and initials I recognized in a hand I taught to write. I didn't rush. I stood under the awning and watched a truck back carefully to the loading dock, hazard lights ticking like a metronome, set to patience. I remembered George's letter led with integrity. I breathed it in the way the ballroom had to breathe when the screen went dark. Then I typed a simple reply forward. I'll read at my desk. On the way out, I took one printed program for the file and handed another to the event coordinator. Please correct the title on future runs, I said. Chair. She swallowed, nodded, and reached for a pen. I don't need credit to work. I need accuracy so that work doesn't die from 1,000 little mislabels. Back at the office, the lobby letters caught the morning light. People passed and smiled without asking for speeches. I set my tote on the desk, placed the bank alert and the LED photo in a fresh folder, and wrote the date and time on the tab. The email from Garrick began to populate one message after another, each careful and dull in the way truth often is before it changes the room it enters. The ballroom fell silent behind me. On my screen, Garrick's name blinked like a door I'd left closed too long. Before I filed the program, I emailed the bank alert to Ruben with a 2-word subject line, as designed. He replied with a thumbs-up icon and a sentence, hold stands, proceed on your schedule. I also sent Tess a short list for the afternoon pull Apex vendor cards print Lucan's approval logs, book a quiet room for Garrick at 4. Calm helps paper breathe. I locked the folder, capped the pen, and felt the day settle into place like a beam finding its bearing. Outside, the bayou ran steady and different, and honest as paper and steel as ever. Sonia had the ballroom screens humming long before the doors opened. I stood with her at the tech table, while Tess checked the mail rules on her laptop. Sonia pointed to the left LED, then to my pen. Click once. The hotkey listens. I practiced it twice, step, breathe, click. No flourish, no second try. We synced watches. I stayed. The floor crew taped the cable, run the projectors, fanned a warm breath, and chandeliers blinked like stars over gold chairs. A runner slid a stack of printed programs onto the lectern. Tess handed me one. They never fixed it, she said. Under participants, my name sat in a smaller font beside a single word, relative. I made a tiny X in the margin and slipped the program into my tote. Keep the paper. We moved to stage right and watched the room slowly fill. Waiters set coffee on side tables. The AV clock ticked toward 10:30. Clients filtered in with careful smiles. I greeted the safety officer first, asking about harness inspections at their turnarounds. Then I greeted the controller and confirmed who would receive documentation when the bank alert hit. Lucan worked the room with a laugh that tried too hard. Malis calibrated her smile in 5 directions at once, dressing herself in other people's light. I stayed near the wing shoulders down badge turned inward, so the barcode faced my heart. The MC tapped the mic and tilted his head toward the stage manager. "Welcome," he said, rich and bright. "It is my honor to invite the family representative to open our ceremony." I let the phrase sit between the rows of chairs until the air thinned. Then I walked out without hurry and placed my binder flat on the lectern. I did not touch the microphone. I did not correct a title. I simply looked at Sonia and closed my fingers around the pen. The click was faint, the effect immediate. The main LED washed white, then stamped a blue bar across the top, Escrow hold. Under it, in clean block type, appeared my initials and the reason line. Authorization R.E. Hale. Reason governance controls pending. Conversation stopped mid-syllable. The ballroom felt like a bell after the strike. I kept my voice at room temperature and used a single sentence. We will close when the agreed controls are honored. My phone vibrated once in my jacket pocket. I did not look down. Tess did. She lifted the screen toward me so I could read without reaching. The bank message was plain and final, dual authorization lock engaged. Funds require R.E. Hale co-signature. Sonia raised her camera and took a still of the LED with the time code in the corner. Tess forwarded the bank email to the client controller and CC'd counsel with the caption, live, verified, logged. The client lead met my eyes from the second row and gave the slightest nod, the kind that says, good. We prefer clean rules. The safety officer's shoulders dropped. Lucan's mouth closed around whatever he had planned to say after my family representative introduction. Melis's lips parted, then tightened as if she had expected a speech to spar with and found a switch instead. I kept my hand still on the binder. The room adjusted to the new temperature. I turned a page and offered a revised schedule. You will have a compliance walkthrough this afternoon, followed by the governance confirmation from council, I said. Your team will receive a secure folder with the bank alert, the overlay image, and the board minutes that govern signature authority. We will reconvene to close after those steps are complete. Coffee is in the foyer. The MC glanced to the wing. I smiled and stepped away from the lectern. Backstage, Sonia exhaled as if she had been holding air for a minute. That was surgical, she said. Tess slid into a chair and began filing overlay capture bank alert photocopy of the misprinted program, a memo to the client with timestamps and next steps. She labeled the folder S9S21 and pushed it into our secure cloud. I initialed the memo and checked the image for clarity. The blue bar read crisp, even in a phone thumbnail. Near the service doors, Lucan slowed, but he did not stop. He studied the carpet. Melis passed 10 feet away, her perfume moving before her. She did not look in. I let them go. My measure had already been taken in public without a single raised voice. In the foyer, the client-led accepted a new calendar invite from Tess and shook my hand with the old, simple words that built this trade. See you after the paperwork. Outside, the heat bounced off the hotel portico, and the sky sat wide and cloudless. I paused in the bright air, letting the quiet reach me. My husband had always said the cleanest power is procedural. Prove it once, and then you never have to explain it again. My phone chimed, an unknown number from an old area code, Garrick. We had not spoken in years. His text was 4 words. We should talk, Row. I saved the number and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The ballroom noise dimmed to a hum behind the doors. I had work to return to, and he had opened a door I had left closed too long. I stepped off the stone and into the light, steady on flat shoes, steady in my breath, the overlay still bright behind my eyes, where it would need to be if anyone tried to deny what all of us had just seen. The ballroom fell silent behind me. On my screen, Garrick's name blinked like a door I'd left closed too long. Back at my desk, the ballroom quiet still clung to my coat. Houston light angled across the river, and the inbox waited like a closed door. Garrick's name sat on top, 3 subjects, same route, apex. I did what Ruben taught me. I did not click. Instead, I buzzed Tess. She walked in with a capture pad, set the phone to record the screen, stamped the time on a yellow slip, and nodded. Only then did I open the first message. He had sent a short note, no drama, just lines. He wrote that when Melis steered bids away from him last year, he kept copies for clarity if the wind changed. Attached a thumb drive manifest and PDFs. I breathed once long and slow the way Father Keene told me to breathe when grief made the pews tilt. Then I opened the archive. A W-9 filled the screen. Apex Consults, LLC, and EIN that looked clean, manager left blank. The remittance address was a P.O. box I knew by feel. One winter I had paid a PR invoice that carried the same line down to the comma. Tess and I placed that old invoice beside the W-9 and drew a neat red arrow between the boxes. Next came a routing slip date, stamped last summer, bearing Lucan's initials in the margin, forwarding, approve, and schedule. My eyes stung, not with tears, but with the recognition of habits I had taught him, date initial hand the file forward. Even in error, the muscle memory held. Tess suggested coffee. I shook my head. We kept moving. In Garrick's next attachment sat a vendor form listing a contact cell. He pressed play on a saved voicemail greeting he had forwarded with it, a woman's voice brisk and bright. "Hi, it's May, leave it." He had saved the clip months ago for scheduling. We logged the audio, captured the metadata, and taped a small label under the printout, "Greeting matches nickname," used on social posts. I didn't need to say whose posts. I called Nadine from HR. She answered on the second ring, the sound of a keyboard under her words. I read the number. She searched the calendar logs. 2 invites from Milas's work address included the same digits embedded in dial-in lines for vendor status. Nadine sent screenshots. Tess printed, stamped, and stacked them into the growing spine of proof. I forwarded the bank's disbursement report we had pulled for April through June. The payout dates curved toward the weeks those invites landed. The pattern was not loud, it was tidy. I pressed my palm against the window and let the ache settle where it could not fog my work. I told Tess we would make a board, not a speech. She wheeled in corkpins tape. We laid the path in order W9 with the familiar P.O. box, the old PR invoice with the same line, the routing slip with Lucan's initials, the vendor form with the burner number, the tiny audio label, the calendar screenshots, the bank payout strip. Each piece was numbered, photographed, and placed in a sleeve. We initialed the backs. When we finished, the board read like a sentence. Reuben called to check my pulse. I told him it was even. He asked for my next verb. Draft, I said. So I did. I wrote 2 forms with clean, sharp edges. The first was a restitution and resignation agreement, repay in full with interest by a defined schedule. Malis resigns all roles. Lucan converts to a monitored project spot with no access to accounts. Both cease any interference. The second was a conditional non-prosecution letter. If funds return in full and policy is respected, I will not seek criminal referral. If not, I will. There were no adjectives, only dates and verbs. At dusk, Garrick walked the drive and handed me a small envelope with the thumb drive inside. I'm not proud I kept it, he said. I am relieved I can give it to someone who won't burn the whole house. I thanked him and did not offer absolution. I walked it to Tess, who sealed and logged it. I texted my son. I used the same plainness I had used all week. Evidence is complete. Meet counsel tomorrow at 10. Bring your driver's license. I did not message his wife. The paper bore her nickname in a voice we had now preserved. The terms named her part and her exit without raising my voice. The sky had given up its color by the time I returned to the board. I slid George's photo to the shelf behind my chair so he watched over the cork. On my desk, the pen I had clicked at the Galleria lay parallel to the edge of a blue-backed agreement. I pictured the door tomorrow and the faces that would enter. I pictured my hands staying level no matter which page they chose to sign. Before leaving, I sent Reuben a short email, board complete. Terms attached. Witnesses and notary confirmed his reply arrived between closing and the hallway's motion lights. Confirmed. I turned the office key, listened to the lock settle, and let the building's night hum wrap around the rooms George and I had built. In grief, we had poured concrete. In anger, people throw words. I had chosen paper. On a sticky note, I listed small courtesies that keep a meeting from becoming a scene: water bottles with intact seals, a stack of pens, tissues under the edge, copies numbered, so no page wanders. Tess set a clock on the credenza and checked batteries. We don't force spectacle. We remove excuses. At 10 sharp the next morning, the door would open and paper would speak louder than any of us had in months. Reuben tapped the blue-back stack with a clean fingertip, read only the verbs he said, and slid the first page toward me. I let the words line up like rail ties: repay, resign, return, refrain, cooperate, consent, acknowledge. Verbs without adjectives sharp enough to cut away the fog we had been living in. I traced the margin with my thumb, felt the cardstock edge, and breathed once steady. The notary recorded the hour and the room a tiny rectangle of ink pinned to the moment. Reuben set the exhibits in a neat row like tools before a repair my capacity memo from Dr. Vale, the Apex archive. Garrick had saved the repayment schedule calculated to the penny. Discussion tied to paper, he said voice even. If a sentence can't point to a page, it doesn't belong at this table. I nodded. The fluorescent hum sounded like a calm heart. Outside, tires hissed in wet air. They came in together, my son and his wife, and behind them, her parents. Camden and Elaine, faces drawn, with travel and dread. No one offered hands. Chairs scraped. Reuben kept his pen capped. I kept my palms flat and open on the table. Wedding band turned inward as if I were sheltering a flame I refused to let go out. Reuben began with the exhibits, not with me. He spoke in nouns and dates: a W-9 for Apex Consults, LLC legitimate EIN manager line blank, a remittance P.O. box that matched a prior PR invoice sent from Melis's desk last year, a routing slip bearing Lucan's initials forward to approve and schedule, then the voicemail transcript: "Hi, it's May, leave it recorded by a vendor months ago, timestamp aligned with payout weeks." He did not raise his voice. He raised the pages. Silence took the chairs one by one as if attendance were being called by truth itself. Camden's jaw worked, then stilled. Elaine folded her fingers as if to pray, but left them open on the wood palms, pale against the walnut, listening to each citation settle like dust after a long road. Terms, Reuben said, and uncapped the pen. "This is the last chance, not a threat." He summarized: Melis resigns today. She repays principal and interest into escrow within 12 months with a first tranche on signing. Lucan remains as project consultant under narrow KPIs, no access to accounts, quarterly ethics training, supervision logged. Conditional non-prosecution from Rowena becomes void on breach or interference. Signatures notarized. If not signed by 3 o'clock, we file civil actions and forward referrals to the fraud unit for review. Melis tried the old words defamation, elder exploitation, family cruelty, waving them as if their sound might turn steel back into air. Reuben answered by putting Exhibit A beneath her hand, the evaluation I had chosen and owned. He laid the bank logs beside it, then the dual sign clause from our bylaws, then the screenshot of the ballroom overlay that froze the funds yesterday. If there is a factual correction, he said, make it now and point to the page. None came. The room breathed and waited. Camden broke first. He reached inside his jacket and set a cashier's check on the table, the ink still fresh enough to shine. Elaine slid forward a signed limited guarantee and consent to a lien on a modest rental they owned. "This ends today," she said in a voice that belonged to kitchens and long nights. I met her eyes and gave one small nod. Mercy, when it is offered, must have teeth. Lucan's fingers hovered above the KPI addendum. His mouth trembled the way it did when he was 5, and insisting he hadn't taken the sugar cookies while the sugar dusted his lip. "I'll earn my way back," he said barely above a whisper. "I will show it in months, not words." He signed the addendum, the ethics acknowledgement, the no-access rider. I did not touch his hand. I kept my promise to myself: paper before sentiment, structure before sorrow. Ink found paper. Stamps found margins. The notary sealed the signatures with dates that felt like doors closing in the right direction. Tess, waiting at reception, collected Melis's badge and laptop without ceremony. IT terminated credentials at once. HR scheduled an exit interview for the afternoon. I emailed our client a neutral governance update. Continuity affirmed, escrow schedule set operations uninterrupted. Inside the company statement, S10 posted procedures stand. Speculation does not. In the hallway, Camden paused as the elevator bell chimed. "Thank you for doing this in daylight," he said, not to be brave, but because the truth can be gentle, even while it is stern. I stood in the threshold of the conference room and whispered a line I have said for years, in kitchens and sick rooms, when hands were held and nights were long. Let truth keep its shape. The elevator doors drew together. Somewhere below, engines idled and a city went on building itself out of steel and poured stone. My phone chimed once brisk as a gavel tap. The compliance monitor flagged a new filing at the Secretary of State Apex North LLC, registered last week, same P.O. box lineage, a new disguise that wore yesterday's perfume. I did not swear. I did not sag. I took a photograph of the alert and forwarded it to Reuben with 3 words: hold and verify. Then I turned the wedding band back to its bright side and walked toward the light of the lobby where the letters of our name had been restored, and where the work would continue, 1 page, 1 signature, 1 clean line at a time. At 8 on Friday, I forwarded the alert about Apex North LLC to Reuben and laid my notebook on the edge of his conference table. Tess opened a new line in our evidence index and read each step aloud so the recorder caught it. Capture the filing page, record the registered agent, copy the timestamp, compare the remittance P.O. box to the one we had already linked to Apex. We printed to PDF with metadata, then to paper with a blue date stamp near the footer. The bundle slid into a clear sleeve labeled S24. Ordinary pages arranged so they would not wiggle when someone tried to shake them. Chain of custody is housekeeping with a spine. Nadine joined by video and drafted an HR affidavit while Tess verified her ID for remote notarization. The affidavit read like a trail across a field calendar in Vites that included the burner number, badge swipes from nights when Apex invoices were scanned, the small roster of who had access to the scanner after 6. We numbered each page signed across the envelope seam and logged the packet out to Ruben's briefcase. I watched the clock without chasing it. The law respects patience more than volume. At 11, we connected with the Secretary of State's fraud unit. The analyst shared our packet on screen and read the index like a recipe weighing each ingredient. When it was my turn, I kept to 3 sentences: who we are, what we found, what we seek. Flag the shell. Hold any changes until verification. Refer if you see fit. The analyst nodded, spoke for the record, and placed a provisional fraud flag on Apex North, pending a follow-up submission within 10 business days. It was not triumph. It was a stop sign planted in the right lane. Walking back from the video call, I paused by the copy room and watched the machine breathe out pages. George once taught me change orders at our kitchen table. Proof lives in patience, and patience kept daily is a quiet promise. Steady. Relief in business often arrives as short emails. The client controller wrote to affirm confidence, pausing the close with no penalties, and extending our bid hold without any public notice. Tess filed the letter as S18 and updated the banner on our intranet continuity affirmed. No one clapped. Desks hummed with pencils, calls steel. The best victories at work sound like work beginning again. By early afternoon, we shifted from flags to court. Ruben drafted our application for a temporary restraining order and built it like a bridge, each exhibit a girder, each citation a bolt. S11, the burner voicemail. Hi, it's May, leave it authenticated and time-stamped. S22, Garrick's archive linking Apex to a shell and a P.O. box already tied to prior PR invoices. S24, the fresh filing. S9 and S21, the escrow hold and dual authorization that kept funds in place. S16, Nadine's HR affidavit. Requested relief was narrow. No contact, no solicitation, no impersonation, no interference. Preservation of devices. Duty court took us at 2:30. The clerk's voice had the tired kindness you hear in airports at night. The judge asked questions with a precise softness that reminded me of Father Keene. The truth was required, but no one needed to bleed for it. What is the harm, he asked. I answered with numbers, not adjectives, payroll dates, liquidated damages and client contracts, safety penalties that could trigger if bids were misrepresented, and the predictable cost of delay if a shell diverted a payment stream. The order granted 14 days of protection and set a status conference. Service by private process was authorized. The gavel's tap was small and complete. In the corridor, I found Lucan by a window, hands in his pockets, sunlight washing the color from his face the way it did when he stood in our driveway after a high school game, unsure where to put his helmet and his pride. Is there any way back? He asked. His voice was a man's but held a boy's echo. Through work, I said. Not shortcuts. Show up, do it right, let the months talk. He nodded like a person nodding at medicine. We said nothing about love. You don't add salt to soup while it is still boiling. The process server texted a photo of the stamped pages within the hour. Service on her counsel was complete and receipt acknowledged. It confirmed there were no external forwarding rules hiding in our system. The bank added the TRO to their compliance file. I sent a brief internal note order, entered operations, continue questions to legal. The company moved on its rails. Trains do not brag when they stay upright. At 6, I stopped at the side chapel at St. Anne. I lit a candle with a shaky hand and sat in the half-dark, the wax smell and the hush, doing what they always do, lowering the volume of my thoughts. I did not bargain. I did not replay the hiss in the church or the click in the ballroom or the ink that dried at the lawyer's table. I said the only words that fit in my mouth when I am tired: let truth keep its shape. The flame nodded. My shoulders fell. 5 minutes can be a kind of mercy. When I stood, my phone showed no missed calls, no demands, no dramatics, only the ordinary grid of tomorrow's tasks waiting their turn. I walked into evening air that smelled faintly of cut grass. Monday at 8:30, her attorney could contest the order, or she could meet the terms she had already signed. Either way, the shape would hold. I had done my part. The rest at last belonged to time. At 8:30 on Monday, the courtroom doors opened like an old book, and opposing counsel handed the clerk a sealed envelope. 2 words were typed on the tab, "I consent." The clerk read the caption into the microphone. The judge nodded us forward, and the room settled into the small official quiet I have come to trust. I kept both hands on my notebook and waited for the record to carry what voices usually bend. On the record, the judge spoke the terms slowly enough for ink: permanent injunction against solicitation, impersonation, interference, preservation of devices, restitution to escrow in tranches, with dates that fit payroll reality, mutual non-disparagement, fee shift on breach. Then the question that matters in rooms like this: do you consent, Ms. Hale? I answered once. Yes, Your Honor, and felt the floor steady under my shoes. The bench turned to me again. Do you seek punishment? I thought of George's steady pen of crews in steel toes waiting for schedules of the hiss I chose not to answer in church. I seek repay refrain repair, I said. The gavel tapped small, complete. The temporary order dissolved into a consent decree with a docket number you could hold in your hand. The clerk stamped the copies and slid one across the rail. Reuben whispered the only celebration we ever attempt. We did the paperwork. The bailiff handed me a certified copy still warm from the machine. Service by consent made a hearing unnecessary next week. The calendar released a small breath. I checked the seal, wrote the docket number on the first page of my notebook, and put the order in a flat envelope that will live in the safe. I pinned the docket receipt behind my desk calendar where bills and birthdays share spaces. In the hallway, Lucan waited by a window tie, loose eyes rimmed. Thank you for the chance, he said. You'll have a weekly KPI check with Indira, I answered. No finance rights. Raises wait until restitution is complete. Integrity over speed. We shook hands instead of hugging. Love is not less for choosing the form that protects it. Tess and I revised the press note twice to keep it clean. No adjectives, she said, and I nodded. The subject line read, Governance Update Title Correction. Distribution went to clients and vendors only. No blast, no hashtags. The QR behind the lobby glass opened to a 1-page summary. Bylaw citation signature blocks a link to the public docket. People who wanted more could read. People who wanted gossip would have to invent it without our help. Back at HQ, Tess posted the press correction at 11 Chair and CEO Rowena E. Hale. No adjectives, no comment on parties. Sonia updated the directory, a QR linked to the governance summary and the docket. We ordered no cupcakes, cut no ribbon. The best course correction looks like the ship staying on water. At noon, we gathered in the lobby. Miguel adjusted a light so the brushed steel letters shone without glare, George and Rowena Hale. I spoke one sentence to staff. We keep what we build by how we behave, and let the silence do the rest. Phones stayed pocketed, desks filled, elevators closed on people who had roofs to pour and paychecks to earn. In the lobby, a young apprentice from a site crew paused beneath the plaque lips, moving as he read our names. Miguel pointed the light a hair to the left, then gave me a thumbs up. It looked like itself again, which is another way of saying it looked like work. By 3, the client's table was cleared of ceremony and clutter. We re-signed the schedule, initialed the safety addendum, and confirmed dual authorization live. Garrick returned as a vendor under a tight compliance clause, showing me his new routing sheet without being asked. Lucan measured footings with a foreman and did not look to see whether I noticed. Doing the work is how a person explains himself. Before dusk, a voicemail arrived through counsel asking for context. I saved it under the consent docket and did not reply. Orders speak so people don't have to, and sometimes silence is how mercy keeps its shape. Camden texted a screenshot of the first escrow transfer. Elaine added a simple, "done." I wrote back, "received, thank you," and closed the thread. By evening, I had a neatly folded schedule taped to the inside of my planner: restitution dates, training milestones, for Lucan quarterly board reviews with time for questions and without room for theater. None of it sounded heroic. That is the point. Families, like buildings, stand because small things carry their weight. At 6:30, I returned to the side chapel at St. Anne, where late sun turns the stone the color of apricots. I lit a candle for George, for the company, for names on our payroll whose mortgages rest on our calendars. Let truth keep its shape. I whispered the same words I used when the lilies were still fresh and the world was loud. The flame bent, then held. 3 months forward, the numbers told their plain story. Margins held, safety claims dropped. The client renewed for another phase. Lucan met his KPIs under supervision, one steady page at a time. Restitution tranches arrived on schedule and were noted in an ordinary ledger. The injunction sat on the shelf like a fence no one tested. I walked the bayou at dawn, then went into work because that is what a kept house requires. Some prayers do not demand thunder. They simply keep a house standing when the wind comes back. Now, I'm leaving you with this in hard seasons: dignity and paper keep a roof over love. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It means measured. I learned to ask for facts, set boundaries, and let lawful steps speak louder than anger. If your family is strained, list what you can prove, protect your health, and choose repair over revenge, then hold that line. What did my story remind you of in your own life? If it helped, drop a 1 or tell me where you're watching from. If not, share why. I'm listening. And if you want more true human stories, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Subscribe and turn on alerts to join a community that values accountability, compassion, and grace.